David Fowley, we're once again hanging out talking about a movie that turns 40 this year, a blockbuster pop cultural landmark classic. About a month ago, we talked about E.T., maybe a little less than that. And now we're here to talk about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, directed by Nicholas Meyer, came out in 82, a movie that I don't think a lot of people expected, not only because of what the way it evolved the Star Trek mythos and the way they told stories, but also the fact that Star Trek the motion picture from a few years earlier was not well received.
Right, right. I think I might have shared this before. I remember vividly when the motion picture, Star Trek One, was released in theaters. My dad took me to the theater, and there were two options: Star Trek the motion picture and Disney's The Black Hole. And my dad wisely took me to The Black Hole. Yes, it still scarred me because it was totally horrifying, especially at the end. I mean, it's, not completely, not totally. Some parts were, but if I at that age, went and saw the motion picture, I would have been like, you know, um, and I think 10-year-old me in 1982. I don't recall seeing The Wrath of Khan in theaters, but I know that it was on heavy rotation on cable, home video, and it definitely renewed. If people weren't already Trekkies, it definitely renewed interest in the three seasons of the show, the original series, and maybe had a little bit, maybe gave us a little bit more respect, or we weren't as harsh on the previous film, but everybody seemed to be embracing this one.
Yeah, I mean, I still have never seen Star Trek the motion picture. It's one of those movies that I keep thinking I'll get around to it, and I know it's had a lot of defenders. It sort of enjoyed a second life in recent years. I know earlier this year they put out a director's edition on Paramount Plus, and I think it's coming to 4K or something. But
Yeah, it just came out
never
this
taken a.
week.
Well, it was this week. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
all six were out this week on 4K for the first time, but motion picture got a lot more bells and whistles. And even this movie, Wrath of Khan, was released on 4K in theatrical and director's cut. Don't ask me what more is on the director's cut. I haven't watched it yet, but you know.
And you and I, we saw this last night, as we saw ET a few weeks ago at one of the Fathom Events
Mhm.
screenings, the big anniversary things. And Ben Mankiewicz did an intro and an outro recorded, of course, and he said next month is Poltergeist. So yeah, they're just 1982 was a huge year
Huge.
for geek movies, and this is one of the geekiest. And I have not watched Star Trek 2 since preparing to watch Star Trek Into Darkness, which was the J.J.
Mm.
Abrams Bad Robot, not reboot of Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. Benedict
Yeah.
Cumberbatch isn't playing Khan. What are you talking about, conspiracy theorist?
We're not
Yeah.
going to switch the whole scene at the end with the two main characters. Mm, yeah.
Wrath of Khan is a movie that I have grown up with. I've only seen
Mhm.
it probably less than 6 times in my life, but I've watched it every like 10 to 15 years, it feels like.
Mhm.
I watched as a little kid, and then I watched it probably somewhere in between then, 10 years ago for Into Darkness, and then last night. And it's always a different experience. When you're a kid, you're like, oh, cool. It's the space battles. It's the ear slugs. It's all of that, the kind of the, what I would consider back then probably overacting. But, and then the last time I watched it in preparation for Into Darkness, it was pretty much just kind of taking mental notes because I'd heard that Into Darkness was a remake of Wrath of Khan, so I want to be familiar with it. Last night, I feel like I'm watching it. I'm 7 years younger than Captain Kirk turned in this movie because it's his birthday in Star Trek 2, and that's one of the thematic elements. But I feel like this is the first time watching it as someone who is close to,
Mhm.
his age. I'm officially in middle age, I believe, knock on wood. But you experience it and you feel different things as an adult who's looking back on his life and all the kind of adventuring and spacefaring in his case. And in my case, is just like everything I did, you know, when I was a kid to having jobs and art school and all the adventures before you settle down and kind of get into a routine with a family. It's a very introspective action movie.
It
I
is.
Yeah. Did you approach it kind of the same way, or have you always felt a certain way about Wrath of Khan? Has it changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed as I've changed over time. It's funny, I mean, movies don't change, we change, you know.
Yeah.
So I have to say, as I was driving to the theater to meet you, I felt kind of exhilarated because it's nice to be able to know that you're going. My wife can't understand why I'm going to see a movie that's 40 years old. You can watch that at home. What are you doing? Um, but I'm like, I'm home all day. I need to get out.
Right.
But it's nice to be able to like get in your car, go to a movie theater, and know that it's going to be a good movie.
And even it's better when it's a great movie,
A
you
great
just
movie. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And it's just like, this is going to be great to go back and revisit this. And sure enough, it is. When that old Paramount logo comes up and the simple opening credits, uh, it it's great. And I was thinking when I was watching this, I have this thing lately where I start to watch like the beginning of movies that I'm familiar with. Like so watching this one, I can't imagine. Um, I would have loved to have seen this with fresh eyes for the first time, because if all you knew was like the series motion picture, and then you open it up with basically the whole crew dying because of the ineptness of this new, trainee captain played by what's her name,
In,
Kirstie Alley. Yeah,
Introducing Kirstie Alley. This is her big,
introducing. This is her
yeah.
big, yeah, Mr. Savick. Uh, Not sure why the Mister's there, but whatever.
I think it
Here's
was like a
a
pseudo
title.
military thing.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
title. Um, and so it's like everybody dies, and then the intro to Kirk, there's this shining light from the elevator, and it's Admiral Kirk now comes in, and it was just all a simulation. I mean, great opening, because like if it's 1982 and all you knew was motion picture, which basically like failed at the box office and was kind of disappointing for some. And then the opening of this one is everybody's dead, everybody dies, but no, let's turn the lights on. Okay, cut. Um, that's a cool opening. It's really kind of like a cool gotcha. But yeah, I mean, the way I approached it, even when I saw this in '82, right around then, like you said, it was an amazing year for film, and I was really into like collecting these like tie-in books, and
Oh yeah.
this is really it's totally lame and geeky, and all it is like it shows you like the dialogue and like little photos.
They're almost like the Topps trading cards that they'd put out
Yeah,
for movies,
yeah,
where it's like
totally.
scene for scene, and yeah.
It's so crazy. Like even there's even no dialogue in that end scene there. It's just like this. We're just gonna give you like the and I got it for like $2.95 back in the day. It's like $12.95 at Amazon right now.
Ooh.
But yeah, exactly, profit. But yeah, I was into that, and I think I had thought that I was getting the novel, and of course I didn't read. It says photo story, um, whatever. But yeah, I was into it, and I think even at a young age, I found it really kind of fascinating and eye opening to uh, have the writers deal with certain themes that maybe I wasn't expecting, like getting old. Kirk is dealing with, as you mentioned, his 49th birthday, which was a year ago for me.
It was
And
52.
was it?
52. Yeah.
Because in the script, I read something in the script where it was 49, but
I looked online because I thought it was 50,
okay.
just assuming because they make such a big deal out of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I just did a Google search before he jumped on, and
Okay.
they said
All right.
the internet said 52, so who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I was just,
But it's somewhere around that big.
surfing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
that
like,
it's
I'm like, man, Kirk, I'm impressed that it took you this long to get your vision corrected like this and needed adjustments. And I like the fact that I caught. This is the first time I caught that. Bones is giving him these bifocals, and he's like, "What are these?" And and it's funny. It's like it is what, like the 23rd century for them, and you would think there would just be like, let me just put this doohickey up to your head and correct your vision really quick. But I don't know. I guess they haven't, or maybe didn't he say he's allergic to that process or something, or he has
Well,
a
it's because the way that they kind of allude to it, it sounds like it's something that you treat. Like they
okay,
use like retinol or Rexinol or something
yeah,
like that, and Kirk's like, I'm allergic to that. So
there you
you'd
go.
think this is before, and I assume this is like a long time before, um, laser surgery. I'm trying to think of it. What's the eye surgery? I just had it and I
Uh,
lost it. LASIK.
LASIK, yeah.
Yeah, before LASIK surgery.
In the real world, we don't know
In the
about the
real
sci-fi
world,
world.
right? So, I mean, I don't know if they were thinking at the time, like, oh, one day you're just gonna be able to beam a laser beam into your eye
Yeah,
and fix your vision. They'd probably treat it with pills or some kind of a medicine.
yeah,
But
but
yeah,
it's the first time that I could remember that like we're hanging out in Kirk's quarters where he has like all these like relics. He's got like an old ship, a sailing ship from Earth. He's got like these weapons on, old weapons that look like a pirate's gun and stuff like on a wall, and there's a fireplace there, and it feels like a place that's lived in apart from the bridge. And I don't I guess I'm either it's an eye-opening thing for me back in the day when I first saw this, like, oh well, these people actually can go somewhere to chill out other than when they're not on the bridge.
well, help me out here because the establishing of that shot, it looks like he's in almost an apartment. There's a giant window with a
Right.
city outside. The scene before that, and I don't know if it was an
Okay.
interstitial scene because I think it was Bones had said something like, "Well, where are you going to go now?" And he said, "Home," because he was from, or
Right.
I think he was supposedly living in San Francisco as an adult. I mean, he was born in Iowa.
Right.
Everyone knows
Yeah.
that. But I got the feeling I'd never picked up on it till last night, so I could be wrong. But I felt like he had gone home,
You're
and
right.
then Bones shows up later to, like he had some time has passed. I don't think they just transported down there, right?
Yeah. So the simulation itself was not like in a ship or anything. It was at like some type of a Starfleet command area or something. And so that was all probably in San Francisco. So yeah,
I
you're
didn't
right.
even put that together. I was
Yeah.
thinking, I was thinking on a ship. Jeez, I gotta watch this
Yeah.
movie again.
I know, again, because then after that, then they go to the Enterprise, and of course,
Right.
with almost every Star Trek movie, and when there's always those establishing shots of like the Enterprise, it's so big, it's beautiful, and then the rousing score and everything, and let's take us out, and there's that great scene where it's now Captain Spock with his new crew, Bones is standing next to Kirk, and he's like, "Do you need a Valium?" While he watches Savick, take the Enterprise out of the loading area, the docking bay. So it establishes that like you have, it's not just about like the themes of like aging, but also like friendship, death, rebirth. All these things were like I was recognizing, back in the day, and seeing it again like last night. I was like, I'm glad that these themes, were there and are still there for us to think about. Um, as far as also just, I think it's not just the crisis of aging, but Kirk is dealing with like, what have I done in my life and what am I doing,
Hmm.
kind of thing.
And that's and he jumping ahead here, but he brings that, I just thought of this, brings that full circle in Star Trek. Oh my gosh, I can't remember
Is it?
anything now. The one where he meets up with Picard.
Oh, generations. Yeah.
Generations, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but because at one point he's talking to Picard and he says, "Don't let them promote you. Don't let them do anything that's going to take you off the bridge of that ship."
Yeah.
Because I feel like I haven't seen Generations in probably 20 years. But I feel like Picard was almost at a certain sort of a crossroads there as well.
Right.
Now that was Kirk's last movie, but in this film, there is that it's not just about aging, but it's about the consequences of youth. One thing, this is a sequel to a Star Trek episode from season one called Space Seed,
Yep.
which I had watched last year because my youngest briefly got into Star Trek for a while. So we watched a bunch of the classic episodes. And Space Seed is a great episode. I mean,
Hmm.
there's one of the lieutenants on the show, Maria McGivers or
Yeah.
McGivers.
Yeah.
Um,
MacGyver's.
MacGyver's, yeah. She ends up, she's kind of like a space anthropologist or whatever, and she falls in love with Khan Noonien Singh, who is a superhuman that had been around 200 years before on Earth, I guess, ahead of the nuclear devastation that had wiped out humanity, right?
The eugenics
Um,
war in 1996.
hmm?
The eugenics war in 1996.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
But so he and a bunch of his people, his fellow genetic superhumans, they'd either escaped or been exiled out into space. I can't remember what the deal was. If they hadn't they been banished or something like that, or did they
I get
escape?
I get the feeling that it wasn't very clear. Even in I rewatched Space Seed last night, and it wasn't even very clear then. There was something going on in Australia, and then they're on this ship, Botany Bay, and all of them are on there. So I get the feeling like I don't know, they were out for like some kind of like for years. I guess they were saying that in the Space Seed they mentioned Kirk and Spock and McCoy mentioned that Khan had ruled certain continents for a
Yeah.
while, and I think that that must have been some government or authorities' way to get rid of them. I have a feeling that they were just outed.
Yeah, it might have been a revolution and they either
Yeah,
escaped or they were, although escape I think is more interesting answer, because I would feel like if there was that degree of revolution, because Khan in Wrath of Khan says that he once had control over millions, I would think that they would probably just kill if there's coups don't usually go well.
right. And
Right.
maybe he was getting overthrown and he was overwhelmed, and we're like, we got to get out of here and find another planet to conquer.
Right. And they end up adrift in space. They get picked up by the Enterprise, and all of the members of the Botany Bay are in stasis. So they're awakened, and Khan is welcomed as this kind of like fascinating relic of a former age. I believe I can't remember, you watched it more recently than I did, but was there something about like they didn't fully understand who or what Khan was because of like bad records from Earth or something? Because they don't treat him like, oh, you are essentially like Hitler of the 21st century. You're just, you are a genetically modified prince.
There isn't a smooth narrative in that, because initially in the first half of the episode, they were like, huh, we don't seem to have, it seems that we don't have a whole lot of records on this. Something happened in Australia, this and that. And then, like, towards the end, like, almost like when he's on trial, basically, they're like, yeah, we have all this information on him. It's like, wait, how did this, did your system get updated or what?
Well, they if they didn't allude to it, maybe there were records they picked up on from the Botany Bay. Who knows?
Could be, could be.
Um, but so anyway, Khan tries to overtake the Enterprise and is foiled. And Kirk basically, instead of killing him and the rest of the people on his crew, they find this planet called Ceti Alpha 5,
Mm-hmm.
and they drop them off. And they say, it's got everything you need. You can start your own world here. People will leave you alone, and we'll come and the Federation will come and check on you.
Right.
Now, in Wrath of Khan, there's a space exploration mission, the USS Reliant, with which Chekhov is now a part of,
Mm-hmm.
serving under Captain Terrell.
The late Paul
And they
Freeman.
find this. Hmm?
The late Paul Freeman.
Yes.
Paul Winfield.
Oh, Winfield. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Paul
Um,
Freeman is Belloc in Raise the Lost Ark.
it all comes full circle.
Yeah, yeah.
But imagine Belloc as Captain Terrell. No. But so they land on this planet because they're trying to find a planetoid or some kind of a moon, basically a giant planet-sized rock that has no signs of life on it for this top secret program called Genesis. And they get an inkling that there is some kind of life or energy on this planet, so they beam down to check it out because they figured there's nothing down there. Maybe maybe the readings are faulty. So Terrell and Chekhov beam down there. They find the wreckage of a ship. They go inside the ship. Chekhov finds a belt that says Botany Bay on the buckle, and he's like, we have to get the hell out of here now.
Freaks
And they
out.
leave, and of course they're confronted by Khan and his people. Now, I've heard it suggested that this is a plot hole because Chekhov wasn't in that first season of Star Trek,
He
but it's not.
was. he
or
was.
he wasn't in.
He
It didn't
he
show up in Space Heat or something, or come in later.
yeah, he wasn't introduced to the show yet. But he was in the first season. Space Seed is in the first season,
Right.
but Chekhov was introduced as a helmsman or whatever, uh, like several episodes later. But
Okay.
that doesn't mean he wasn't on the Enterprise.
Right. And they cleverly established this, I think, for people who are really paying attention to Space Seed and Wrath of Khan. Khan doesn't say, "Hey, I remember, when we fought or you kicked me off your
Mm.
ship." He says, "I never forget a face, Commander Chekhov," because in Space Seed, Khan asks, because he's like, I'm a genius, but I haven't been around for 200 years. Can I have access to all your ship's library, essentially? So he spends days reading up on all the personnel, which would have been a red flag for me personally,
I
but
mean,
it's not inconceivable that he would have read and remembered who Chekhov was because he was part of the Enterprise.
there's got to be a better protocol on that because Kirk should have been written up for that. Because I'm like, dude, you you picked up this guy who's been frozen for 200 years and you just give him all our access. It's like, hello.
Well, we got to talk about Starfleet protocol too, because one of the things Khan is so upset about, and this is a detail that I don't think I picked up on until the last time I watched it a few years ago, but Khan has all these, crazy accoutrement on his body, on his outfit, which includes that giant, I don't know what the hell that jacket is, but it's got the giant exposed chest, so his pecs are hanging
Yep.
out. But he's also got this, it's a damaged Starfleet emblem on a necklace hanging like right down there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool looking. It's like all black and burned. But he's upset primarily because Ceti Alpha 6, which was an orbiting planet to Ceti Alpha 5, exploded 6 months after they landed there. It's been 15 years. They were basically lucky to survive because the planet they were on basically got eviscerated and turned into a desert. So
And
they had to
knocked it out
scrape
of
by
orbit. Yeah.
right. And they had to scrape by to survive. They discovered these little leech armadillo creatures that killed like a number of the crew, including Khan's wife, who they never mention her by name, but I'm assuming it's
You
MacGyver's.
think it's MacGyver's? Yeah. I was wondering
Right.
about that.
Because she left with them at the end of Space Seed.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I know they're bad people and all this stuff, but I'm in love with Khan.
Well, it's like face court martial or go with these guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Court martial probably would have been better in the long run. But Khan, his big beef is Kirk. He said Kirk never bothered to check on our progress. So would Kirk, he had to have reported this incident to Starfleet.
Sure.
So is it his responsibility to do that? Or does Starfleet have a division of like, a planetary inventory? Like, okay, 5 years from now, we got to go check on this planet. And, 6 months from now, it's your turn or whatever.
Well, these captain's logs, they got to go somewhere, right? So he's not just uploading it as a Dear Diary, and so he's got to, or downloading it as a Dear Diary. He's got to upload them somewhere. So I would imagine they go directly to all the captain's logs go to some kind of hub on Starfleet Command, and so somebody had to know about this. If not, Spock knew about this because at the end of Space Seed, he was like, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this seed that you've planted in space, hence the title. A year from now or something like that, or 6 years from now or whatever. But Kirk's like, yeah, I don't want to really find out. Let's keep going. Bum, 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 bum.
Well, but that's the thing is, Kirk, he's got a lot to account for in this show. I mean, he doesn't really need to feel guilty about Khan because he resolved it the best way he could. He didn't kill the
Sure.
entire crew. He put them down a place where he thought, I would say his biggest sin is allowing that to be neglected. But he had, this was season 1, so he had like hundreds of more space adventures in between. He can't be responsible for everything,
And
but I'm sure he feels bad about what happened to those people.
it would have been really cool because I don't know in '67 how well this particular episode was received. It's also odd because this show was controversial when it came out and everything for a couple of different, a variety of reasons, but it was also like not a hit. So I don't know how
You talking about
Well,
Space Seed or Star Trek?
the original series. It wasn't really a
Okay,
hit
yeah.
until syndication. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering how that episode was received because, as you mentioned, it's a great episode, and Ricardo Montalban is fantastic, and he's got a great presence and everything. So like it would have been of all the episodes, it would have been very interesting to say, let's catch up with this guy in season 3 and
Mm.
do a follow-up and say, there's been some activity here, we have forgotten to follow up, let's go check out what's happening. But I like the idea of, okay, we know that motion picture didn't do so well. Harv Bennett comes in as a producer. Nicholas Meyer, who had never seen a Star Trek episode, comes in, and I think that, I mean, that's a great idea. Roddenberry wasn't a huge fan of what was happening, the changing of the guards, so to speak. But these fresh eyes, it was great for them to scour through these episodes and say, okay, the problem was not a really great antagonist for the motion picture. We got to change that for the second movie. And then they find Khan. They unearth him. It's like they found him in cryogenic stasis, and I think it's great to see. I've said before, I'm a fan of actors coming back to a character for so long a time, and here he is. What's funny is in March of '82, T.J. Hooker premiered.
Oh,
So this movie came out in like June of '82. You got so you have T.J. Hooker on ABC, Shatner, and you have Fantasy Island on ABC, Ricardo Montalban. So here's like these ABC titans, whatever. But it is just kind of interesting. It's like these guys had these, and they had to work around Fantasy Island schedule and everything.
can you
I thought
imagine if TJ Hooker had to solve a crime on Fantasy Island?
it would be awesome. Or Mr. Work was taking a break from Fantasy Island and he got caught up in like a bank robbery and TJ Hooker or something. Heather Locklear comes to his rescue. But or Adrian Smith. Yeah, so I thought, I'm trying to put myself in like, where were these actors back then? And I know Nimoy, Leonard Nimoy he was kind of hesitant to come back, kind of like, all right, I'll come back if my character dies. But what's funny is,
It's very much a Harrison Ford kind of thing.
right? What's funny is this movie kicked off the Star Trek franchise's best trilogy. If you look at 2, 3,
Yes.
and 4, it's all seamless, pretty much, and it's all about this death and rebirth of Spock, basically. So very smart for Leonard, and then he winds up directing the next 2. Yeah.
It's almost a shame that, because one of my favorite lines, I think, of Star Trek ever was in Star Trek 3, The Search for
Mhm.
Spock, where the Klingons they find out about Genesis, they go onto the planet, there's this whole big struggle with Christopher Lloyd playing the great commander. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, so I have no idea if it holds up, but in my mind it was great. I think that was the first Star Trek movie I saw in the theater, at least I can remember seeing
Me
in the theater.
too. Search for Spock. Yeah, me too. Probably.
I want to say my parents took me to see Wrath of Khan when I was 5, but I can't attest to that for sure.
Right.
But no, it's the bit where in order to save everybody, they have to blow up the Enterprise. And there's that great
Yes.
shot of Kirk and McCoy looking up in the sky and it's all red and orange. And he says, "My God, Bones, what have I done?" And then Bones says, what you always do, you turn certain death into a fighting chance to live. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that line.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the theme of Star Trek 2, in terms of sacrifice, of the Kobayashi Maru. I hadn't really picked up on. I just thought that was the name of the test. It's actually the name of the
The name of the
vessel
ship. Yeah.
that is stranded, that the trainees have to decide,
Right.
do I cross into the neutral zone to rescue this ship with the risk of an advancing Klingon army, or do I leave them there to die of certain radiation poisoning and hundreds of people are obliterated? I wonder if I don't know if this has been covered in other Trek lore or movies or TV shows, but it'd be cool to see a Kobe Marashi Maru a Kobayashi Maru episode. Like,
Yeah,
what if that were based on an actual incident,
actual,
and
yeah.
it was so legendary that they made it into the test?
Well, it could be. I mean, I haven't totally caught up on Strange New Worlds, the new show, not Discovery, but the new show. Supposedly that supposedly leads up to the original series, so it could be in there. I know that Kobayashi Maru was mentioned in the uh, Abrams Star Trek, but I forget to what degree.
Well, they
Um,
actually show it because Chris
yeah.
Pine's Kirk, they show in Star Trek 2, it's kind of a running gag because, as you mentioned, it opens with the Kobayashi Maru and
Hmm.
Savick, who's the new Vulcan kind of trainee.
Hmm.
She fails the test, and then Kirk legendarily passed the test, but he did it by unconventional means, and she keeps asking about it throughout the movie, and he finally tells her, he's like, "I cheated,"
Yeah,
or
I mean,
I
I
think
think
Bones said he
Bones. Yeah,
cheated. Yeah,
yeah.
he
You're
said
looking
I
at the only person. Yeah.
yeah, he said I reworked the conditions of the game.
And
And
his
she's like, "What
son's
does that
like,
mean?"
you cheated.
Right. Yes. And I think in Star Trek 2009, we actually see that bit of cheating. And the more I watch of older Star Trek, the less I appreciate what Abrams did to Star Trek. Because I'm watching it. It was a fun moment in 2009 because Chris Pine was having a lot of fun. But during the Kobayashi Maru, he's like sitting there eating an apple and like crunching through, like, nope, nope, yep, everything's fine. I got nothing to worry about. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, there's no stress or sweat. Yeah. Um, you know, like I said, death and rebirth is a big theme in this movie. And you even mentioned in Star Trek 3, it's mentioned there. I again, even at a young age, I like the fact that the writers play to the main cast's age, and I all through it, I appreciated the fact that like they really wouldn't get out of a situation without life experience under their belt. And that's what I appreciate about like the fact that at no point in the first 6 Star Trek movies did they ever say, you know what, we need a new crew because we gotta play to younger viewers now. And it's like, no, I think it's a great thing that they did is just keep with this crew with all of them, Sulu, Scotty, and Uhuru.
Nichelle
Um,
Nichols, who
yeah,
recently passed away. There was a nice,
right,
I was going to say there
right,
was a nice tribute to her before the movie, but they did this weird thing where they had a still photo. They had the white text on black. It's like, we will always remember and treasure
yeah,
pioneer Nichelle Nichols.
yeah.
And they had this weird, like, mumbling movie theater white noise underneath it. I'm
Yeah,
like, what are
like
you
people
doing?
chattering or something. I mean, you could have just played the music, right, of Star Trek
Yeah.
music.
Or
I'm not even,
silence.
yeah, I'm not even going to go there about the auxiliary noise in our theater from other movies, but I don't. It's 2022 and we can't figure that out yet. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, for folks who don't know, there was an action movie of some kind playing in the auditorium across the hall from our theater, and there'd be nice quiet moments or like these great was it Jerry Goldsmith doing the
yeah,
score?
yeah.
Nice kind of like lyrical like little notes underscored
James,
by boom 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 boom
sorry,
boom boom. Like,
James Horner. Sorry, the others were
Horner, right?
Goldsmith. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, okay.
One line in the beginning here, and as I'm reading the photo story, that Savick during the Kobayashi Maru is, she's bothered that she failed. And then one line that Kirk shares with her, it really kind of speaks. I forgot that it kind of speaks to death early on that we're going to deal with, that he's going to face later on. He says, how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. Wouldn't you say, Savick? And he's gonna live out those words, later on. And it it's funny because obviously we know that Spock dies at the end. Spoiler alert for a 40-year-old movie. Um, and you know, back then fans were outraged and everything. And I guess, like good old Ben Mankiewicz said, there was a leak and everything, and people were like, oh no. But it speaks to if Spock, a Vulcan, sees that what he has to do is the only way out because he's a man of logic, is the only way out. I mean, that's a huge thing.
It is, and it's also I don't know that much about like what Vulcans are supposed to be. But Spock does call out earlier on when, because he's got command of this crew, and it's a crew of trainees. They're on a training mission when they get called to investigate the issue going on at the space station with this Genesis probe.
Mhm.
And so Kirk goes to Spock and says, look, we got to go do this thing, but I'm the Admiral, but this is your ship. And then Spock's like, if we're going out into actual space adventures, we're going to need, you essentially. Don't worry, Captain, or Admiral, I have no ego to bruise. So you pair that with the idea of self-sacrifice. You don't get the feeling that Spock is going to throw his life away willy-nilly unless, as you put it, it's the only outcome. But as the climax of this movie ramps up, everybody's on the bridge. They're freaking out because Khan has the Genesis, weapon, and it's about to go off in like 10 minutes. Spock just like kind of slides around in his chair. You see him kind of consider something and look up, and then he just like goes to engineering, and no one can stop him. It's almost instantaneous, but you wonder, what does he feel about his own life? He's a very complicated man. And one of the details I loved is, after the smoke has cleared, Kirk runs down to engineering and sees Spock, and he calls out to him inside the chamber. Spock is on the floor, and he gets up and he stands up and he straightens
his
the bottom of
jacket.
his jacket. Like he's dignified to the bitter end. It's so beautiful.
And I love that right before then, we would never really pick up on this until probably the end of Star Trek or Search for Spock and Voyage Home, when he's about to go into the radiation chamber. He basically places his hands on McCoy's face and says, "Remember." Back in '82, we were like, okay, like, remember me? I don't know. Could be. Here's some memories of us together. No, but basically, he's downloading himself into McCoy, and that's brilliant. That's why, Star Trek 3 and basically the issue is we got to help McCoy because he's there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with him. It's great. But I'm wondering, like, okay, the writer of the screenplay by Jack B. Sowards, the story is by Sowards and producer Harv Bennett. Did they know that they would be in the next two movies? They would be dealing with this whole McCoy Spock thing. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, I wonder if that, again, the Vulcan mind meld, was that something from the TV series, or was that a product of the movies? I
The
couldn't
mind
tell you.
meld was in the original series, but never to the point of, it's more of like, this guy won't give us an answer. Spock, do your thing. We got to get information out of him. Spock, do your thing. It was more about getting information, not necessarily like transferring mental files over. You know what I mean?
Well, and but to your question, this mini trilogy, as you put it, I think it is undeniably brilliant because it is one long story with a definite beginning, middle, and an end.
And Wales.
You get the feeling that they did sit down to plot out 3 movies, but because of the way that they're spaced out, I mean, they're like 2-3 years between the sequels. I don't know if that was the case, or if they got called upon to do a sequel. Because, okay, motion picture comes out, flops, Wrath of Khan, they're like, maybe we'll get another one if anybody shows up to this thing, but it wasn't guaranteed. So if they didn't plot out the next 3 movies, the creative team at least came in ahead of each one and did their homework. They watched the previous movies. They probably went back and watched the original series again to see what they could mine from it. But it's something you were saying earlier about having people who are older movie stars headlining major sci-fi franchises. That stuck out to me last night. Like, this movie is smarter, it's cooler, it's more emotional, it's more exciting than most anything that's come out of Hollywood for the summer season in at least half a decade. And I'm starting to miss it. I want to go to all these Fathom events and just relive my childhood on the big screen,
right,
and just
with 12 other people.
New stuff. Hey, at least it was 12 people.
Yeah. And you know what I liked? I don't know if you picked up on it, is like, you and I were both kind of chuckling at the interaction between Shatner and Bones. Let's say Kirk and Bones, and then like Kirk and Spock. It's an internal chuckle that we remembered their camaraderie. We remembered the humor. And it's also a chuckle that's like, it's good to be back and experiencing this kind of thing. And there was one woman behind us, and she was basically like kind of chuckling at the same thing. And it was great to have this, like, kind of like, here we are with this kind of geek community, this subculture of Trekkies on Star Trek Day. I don't even know.
Yeah, that's right.
It was actually Star Trek Day when we watched this. And I guess they made some announcements about like Carol Kane becoming a senior officer on the new show.
Yeah.
Interesting. But it was cool to have that. You don't have that with like, I can't think of any other ongoing franchise that has that great camaraderie that Bones, Spock, and Kirk did, at least the original cast. Yeah.
Right. And Star Trek 2, it's 2 hours long. And in some places I felt it, like when they're kind of slowly chasing each other through the nebula at the end,
Yeah.
ships passing in the night. But it doesn't feel that it knows how and when to be exciting. And it knows that to really be exciting, you have to have moments that are not just punctuated by jokes or action or special effects, right? This
Right.
movie takes its time, it breathes, it's about so many different things. I mean, the whole subplot with Kirk and Dr. Carol Marcus, who, because of the timeline, they had a son together named David, who's probably like 25 or so.
Right.
You're looking at, Kirk and she probably had this stuff, wild love affair back in, maybe even the academy days at this
Who
point.
knows? Yeah.
Right. But it's a mature relationship. You get a lifetime's worth of story in maybe 10 minutes of dialogue that's scattered throughout the film. It's so beautifully handled. It's understated, but you get the full impact of this relationship. You have a lovely moment with David and Kirk towards the end of the film. David has hated his dad. I get the feeling that she probably told him that Kirk was his dad, like at the end of this adventure. The way that
That's what I'm thinking too.
The way that he talks about Kirk throughout the rest of the film is just of him being like some kind of basically a brash military figure that's trying to steal the weapon they've been developing, or the seed.
It'd be funny if there's a cutout scene saying, she's like, "Don't talk to him like that. He's your father." It's like, what? And Kirk's like, "What?" But yeah, I mean, I feel like Kirk kind of knew right away.
Oh, he totally knows.
Yeah,
I wonder if he's paying like child support.
I know, right? Captain's log, another child support payment out the poop chute. But
he's going around spreading his space seed.
But I even like how you talk about how their history is, we catch up with their history easily in this movie. It's even in the quick conversation on the elevator between Bones and Kirk, because Bones knew about Carol, and even Spock was like, "Oh, Dr. Carol Marcus." It's like everybody knows about Kirk's past love affairs. It's kind of funny.
It is, and BB Besh is great in this part, and so is Kirstie Alley as Saavik. And again, it's a contrast between the way I think that women are portrayed in action movies in 2022 or sci-fi movies versus the way they are in 1982. I feel like if new audiences or modern audiences were to rediscover or just discover Star Trek 2, they might be completely surprised by these strong women who are very undeniably feminine, but they are in positions of power, without resorting to having to be like take on the worst traits of men in order to seem powerful in in an action movie.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that even in the quick intro to Dr. Carol Marcus is, she had to contend with not just obviously she was working alongside other men in the science division, but she also had to contend with Starfleet, and they're kind of intervening in her work and their work. And so she has to deal with men who, maybe see that they can have somewhat power over her science division and everything. So yeah, I definitely appreciated her characterization. And I will say Star Trek Into Darkness totally, dropped the ball on their Carol Marcus, even though Alice Eve was, great to look at.
She was basically I haven't watched Into Darkness
it's like an underwear model.
Yeah, it was a pinup versus what I would look at Carol Marcus and say, and again, she's also probably in her late 40s, early
Yeah,
50s. If I had to guess, she's supposed to be matched with Kirk. It's not
yeah,
like, oh yeah, she's this hot 25-year-old and I'm 50 and all that.
yeah.
She's a
We're just
mature,
changing clothes. Yeah,
beautiful adult woman, and that
yeah,
is hot as hell.
yeah. No, I totally agree. Um, yeah, so it's, I mean, it's great to watch this with the life experience that we have now, and knowing that it was essentially, pretty much they were not cutting corners, but they were dealing with a low and tight budget.
Yeah.
And using other set pieces, and even having more, relying more on model ships and miniature explosions than say the computer special effects they work with, they'll work with later. Even though they worked with ILM on this movie, it was primarily kind of like this groundbreaking computerized, like when they watched this computer simulation of what Genesis is capable of, that was groundbreaking for 82. Yeah.
And you know what? It's still, I don't know if this was a restored version or whatever we've watched, but when I'm watching, especially, I know I gave crap to the nebula sequence where they're flying into this
Mm.
pink purple cloud to like jam each other's signals so they can't raise shields and fire on each other. Uh, it looks amazing. It does
Yeah.
not look like, oh, these are model ships and they're photographed a certain way to look convincing. They look convincing.
Yeah. I didn't mind watching it last night and going, that's a cool painting. I didn't mind that at all. It's like I still felt immersed in the story and everything, but I was like, oh, that's nice paint. That's some nice matte work there. Cool.
And also there's kind of a horror element to the movie too, like when they're on the uh oh my regular one,
Yeah.
the science
Oh
station,
yeah.
and everyone's been tortured and killed. They're going through the corridors, and then they find the
Mm-hmm.
bodies dangling down like all Predator
The
style.
music and everything. Yeah.
Right, but also the Genesis demo video for Starfleet is kind of spooky. Like this is dead gray planetoid, and then this bomb hits, and then everything is kind of wrapped like life forms, and you got these rivers and lakes and mountains and things. But then you start to consider Bones's speech, which is very much like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Hey, it's this cool thing we can do, but in the wrong hands, this could destroy the universe. And you start to wonder, what would happen if that were dropped on a planet full of
Mm.
living things?
Dude, Ian Malcolm and Bones would get along great.
Wait,
Like
I missed that. Was that
Ian Malcolm and Bones would get along great. Yeah.
there? That's my fantasy
Mhm.
my fantasy sci-fi film.
That's right. That's right.
Bones and Malcolm and
There you
Bones.
go.
But before we go, I want to talk briefly about Ricardo Montalban.
Of course.
He's wonderful in this movie, but there is, you know, you can tell he's gone space crazy.
He's
And there's
theatrical.
one bit that we both laughed at. The iconic scene where Kirk is left inside this planetoid, and
Mm.
Khan basically says, I'm going to leave you buried alive. And then Khan goes, or Kirk goes, Khan!
Yeah, and
Khan is listening to this, and his
he's
eyes are
like,
closed and his head back. Like, I think he did something in his pants
I
watching
think it was
that.
orgasmic.
Yes, exactly. Like, I'm surprised that hasn't become some kind of a meme somewhere. But okay, two things.
Great
I'd be
stuff.
remiss if I didn't bring up.
Uh-oh.
I was rebagging and boarding my comics and
Oh my
magazines, and I
gosh.
found January of '83,
Wow.
the Mad
Wow.
Magazine issue with
Nice.
Star Trek 2 and ET and
That's
Annie for some.
awesome.
Yeah. And I'm reading a
Uh-oh.
book
But wait,
called,
there's more.
oh, yes.
What is that?
I'm reading a book called, I've been reading it for months because I'm picking at it.
Scored
It's
to
called
death.
Scored to Death. It's a book of interviews by my friend Blake. He interviewed a bunch of film composers.
Mm-hmm.
And one person he talked to is Alan Holworth, who is most notable for doing Halloween with John Carpenter. But he also worked on all of the Star Trek movies. And he was talking about, there's a great passage in here where he's talking about getting to go to NASA, and because he did the sound design
Oh,
on Star
cool.
Trek 2. So
Mm-hmm.
in order to not the music, but the
Sure.
effect, the sound effects of things, and he had to
Right.
invent, like, what does a space gadget sound like? He went to NASA and got access to top secret NASA materials, but he would go like down a long dark hallway, and there'd be someone saying, here, wait here with your recording equipment. They'd go into the next room, turn on whatever it was so he could hear it, and he'd record it, but he couldn't see what it was
Awesome.
because it was top secret.
Yeah. So I recorded that, but I don't know where I got it from.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
But it just goes to show like the ingenuity of, the people that worked on these movies in all capacities. It's
Yeah.
40 years later, it still holds up as a great movie. And yeah, it's a shame these are like 1 and 2 night events. They should just put these back in theaters and see
Put
how
them out
long
for a
they.
couple of months. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's why not?
I don't know,
And
but
when the theater we were in, the Blob, the original Blob, was showing with Steve McQueen, and Jaws 3D was across the aisle or the hallway.
last night
Yeah, yeah.
I totally missed that. That
Yeah.
that theater was nice, but it was also dead. Like when I showed up there a half hour before you did, it was me and the employees, and that was it.
Yeah. Well,
But
there we go.
all right, well, David Fowley of Keeping It Real. Let me introduce you at the very end. Thank you.
You do introduce me before. You just didn't do the keeping it real part, but
Well, that's important too.
it is. Yeah.
But thank you again for taking another trip down memory lane. I'm glad I got to see this with you last night and talk about it today. So thanks a lot, sir.
No problem. See you later.
All right, take it easy, man. Bye.